Hello everyone, welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today's topic is the Ogre Kingdoms and the possible problems they may have when it comes to siege battles and how it could be implemented. So without further ado, let's begin. The Ogre Kingdoms are one of the races we can fully expect to arrive at some point in the life cycle of Total War Warhammer 3. Whether as a core game race or via a paid for race pack is still uncertain, but as we get closer and closer to their eventual release, I can't help but wonder how siege warfare would work for the Ogre Kingdoms. This is not just in terms on how sieges would work for them, but also in terms of balance for all other races. Firstly, it can be assumed that the Ogre Kingdoms may not have access to walled settlements, simply because the majority of them, around 90% of their established units, are comprised of monstrous infantry, cavalry and generic monsters, all of which currently cannot take to the walls unless they have the ability to fly. But it could be possible that this could change in the upcoming siege rework in Total War Warhammer 3. So it could be possible that we'll see some ogre tribes manning some fortresses, but it could be possible that they may not have any walled cities altogether if we take the following into account. The Ogre Kingdoms themselves are a nomadic race and don't really settle down for too long, barring a few exceptions. So it can be assumed that the Ogre Kingdoms will either be a horde race or control settlements the same way LUSC does. It is doubtful that the Ogre Kingdoms will be a horde race unless the horde rework comes on the same day of release of Total War Warhammer 3, before or shortly after, and it is very unlikely that any new horde factions or races will be added in until a complete overhaul of the horde system comes into effect, or that can be the general hope at least. So honestly, the best option here would be for the race to have a similar settlement system as LUSC, where they would have access to settlements as normal but without any access to walls. This would be the perfect time to also implement actual settlements and camps for battles, or else if not, then every battle would be in plain open field and would get boring rather quickly, which is one of the big problems affecting LUSC. In truth, any settlement that doesn't have any access to walls at the moment should at least have some generic look towards it with buildings, coves, or anything that is respective to the race that currently occupies it. But let's not open up that can of worms today, and let's keep the focus on the Ogre Kingdoms. Naturally, the upcoming siege rework in Total War Warhammer 3 could possibly allow for certain monstrous infantry like the Ogre Bull, Iron Gut or Lead Belcher and characters to be able to be placed atop of walls. But given the sheer mass of the ogres, it may present to be a problem for any invaders trying to get onto the walls via ladders or siege towers, as there wouldn't be much space for the invaders to actually move into, especially when you take into account siege towers where your troops might find themselves very bunched up and the ogres surrounding it relatively quickly, and taking into account that monstrous units are actually quite good against horde units as their attacks seem to have an element of splash damage, this is the last thing that you'd want for your basic troops to be caught by, especially in a choke point such as a wall position where you won't be able to move away, further reinforcing why ogres shouldn't really have access to any walls. The same could be said when in regards to ogres attacking walled settlements, as given the size of the ogres themselves, it would be highly unlikely that we'd see ogres using bigger ladders or siege towers. Obviously, smaller units in the Ogre Kingdom's roster, such as the Noblars, could use ladders and siege towers, but given their extremely weak nature, having similar stats to Skaven slaves on the tabletop, you'd essentially be sending a wall of cheap units to the enemy battlements that would either rout before reaching the walls or on top of them as soon as they engage into combat. I've seen some theories online that people believe that the ogres will be able to climb the walls physically themselves, but honestly, given the Total War engine, this seems highly unlikely. It seems like a lot of work to be able to make this race be able to climb up walls, and then if that's the case, then other people will start wanting that for other races and factions, say for example, the Forest Goblin Spider Riders, which had a rule in the tabletop that could travel over terrain, Hex race being able to travel through walls, and so on. Something like this would just bring way too many complications into the series. The way I see it, and I believe the majority of the Total War Warhammer fanbase do too, is that every ogre unit will have the siege attacker trait as they are monstrous infantry, unless their classification changes to something along the lines of large infantry. Having the siege attacker trait will allow the ogres to instantly start attacking enemy castles without having to build any forms of siege equipment, that is if they get any access to them. Even then, this is the famously known gate rush which makes siege battles so boring to begin with and would present a massive problem to the Ogre Kingdoms. You see, if you take the current siege system into account, ogres would be at a massive disadvantage when attacking any walled settlements. Going for the gate rush tactic when attacking as ogres might be a bit of a problem. You see, the army would be expected to have a lower model count than most to represent how they were in the tabletop. So it can be assumed that you'd move in 1 or 2 concentrated forces towards the enemy gates, meaning that your enemy would deploy to counteract that with all its forces centered around the gates themselves. With ranged and magical units upon the walls where they're nice and safe and they'll be able to damage you without any fear, with all melee types, especially those with a bonus to anti-large, waiting at the other side of the gate, ready to brace themselves for the eventual ogre charge, leading for your forces to be caught up in all sides, and if the enemy has a lot of anti-large units, you start losing your forces relatively quickly. So how could the ogres have an effective way of laying siege to enemy walled cities? Well, we have a few ideas. Firstly, anything within the Ogre Kingdom roster which could be considered either a monster or monstrous infantry should have the siege attacker trait. This would be 90% of the roster more or less. Next, anything considered an extremely large monster, such as the Thunder Tusk or the Stonehorn, should be able to attack walls directly. These creatures are known for their massive size and incredible brute strength, so it would make sense for them to be able to attack the walls. This would allow for the ogre player to effectively split up his or her armies and not have to focus directly on gates. If you're attacking from multiple points, your enemy would have to split up their army and not have such a concentrated rate of fire onto your forces. Next, one of the only forms of ranged units would be the lead belcher. Lead belchers themselves can be essentially considered moving artillery pieces, as their handguns, if you can really call it that, are cannons. Now, their ammo is usually just a bunch of scrap that is placed in the cannon and fired at their enemy in the form of a spray and pray. But it could be that a second variant of lead belcher is created, where rather than using it as a shotgun type of weapon, they would be using their cannons as cannons, just with a reduced rate of accuracy and reduced rate of fire. Not only would these be an effective ranged anti-large unit, but they would also be considered a siege unit too. As their ranged weapons are cannons, it is expected of them to be able to fire directly at walls as if they were normal cannons. In an effort to keep things balanced and not have sections of walls be destroyed within seconds, it could be assumed also that the lead belcher cannons would be a little bit weaker than the standard cannon itself, where one full round of complete shots from a full squad would do the same amount of damage to a wall as, say, one solitary Empire cannon. This would represent the fact that the ogres aren't really well known for taking care of their own equipment, so these cannons would not be as effective as one, say for example, that is maintained quite often by an Imperial engineer. And lastly, there would be the big artillery piece, the Iron Blaster with the cannon of the Sky Titans. Now, this is supposed to be one of the most sophisticated cannons in all of Warhammer Fantasy. A marvel in engineering created by a race that no longer exists and somehow found its way into the hands of the ogres. The cannon of the Sky Titans is known to be incredibly powerful, so it could be assumed in Total War Warhammer it would maybe do double or triple the damage to the walls than an average cannon would do. For example, if a cannon normally knocks out about 3% of a wall per shot, then you could expect the cannon of the Sky Titans to be able to do at least 6 to 9%. I believe that the implementation of these 4 points might work well for the Ogre Kingdoms when it comes to sieges. Now, we have to take into account that we don't know exactly when the siege rework is going to come into effect. So the majority of this video has come into mind with the current siege system, which itself is quite outdated and, well, let's be very honest here, not very fun. Now, in a perfect world, by the time that the Ogre Kingdoms do get launched, we could have the rework to the Horde system, the siege system, and everything else. But then again, we are aware that these things take time, and reworks come every DLC cycle more or less. But in that case, I think my suggestions are okay, but if you guys have any suggestions on how the Ogre Kingdoms would work in sieges, both attacking and defending, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm rather curious to see what you guys think, because honestly, this is a race I'm quite hyped up to play. Don't get me wrong, I'm interested in all the others too. I mean, I'm dying for Chaos Demons, but the ogres were always quite interesting to me on the tabletop, and they seem to present quite the challenge to be implemented into the Total War series, more so than any other race. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below, we have various different social media links, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord, where you can get in contact with the Great Book team, talk to us about Total War, Warhammer, or just anything, really. Also in the description section below is an affiliate link with Element Games, where you could get loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Purchasing using this link and also using our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons, your support means the world to us. Honestly, it's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A special thank you to our patrons Gibraltar LUSC and Ryan Bertsche for subscribing to us at our fame level. Honestly, you guys are super cool. And a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, the channel's been growing a lot lately and it's all thanks to you guys. Without you, the great book would be nothing. We're trying to implement more videos into the channel soon, but we're getting stuff done outside of YouTube at the moment, just like artwork and so on for the channel. It's just taking a little while to get everything to look to a standard that we feel is cool. Honestly guys, thank you so much for all the support lately, it's been amazing. But with that my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.